Hey, welcome to this new video and series. In this new series, we will create a new system called Player Death Helper. What this is going to do is give the player gold when they have died a certain amount of times. And this is going to be a more intermediate tutorial because we are going to work with our own custom database table and saving data to a database table and so on. So let's just head right into Visual Studio Code and get started. So yes, first off, create a new folder, call this whatever you want. I'll call it helper. Player helper. Player dev helper. I think that's a better name. Inside here, we actually gotta create more than just one script. First off, let's create player dev helper dot lua underscore core dot lua. This is the core for the script where all our main logic will be inside. Next, create a right-click new file again. Player dev helper underscore database dot lua. This will be where all our functions to call the database and get data and save the player will be added. Next, right click again, new file, player dev helper underscore config dot lua. This is where we want to add the different amount of gold we want to give the player and how many times for each. Like if they need to die like 2 times for one reward and 3 for the next and stuff. So let's add the last one, which is called the player dev helper underscore reward system dot lua. This is where we will be giving the player the gold and such. But it's much easier whenever we build up everything first to understand what I'm talking about here. So let's close these 3. So the database one, the config and reward system. Because the first thing we're gonna do is actually going to be setting up for new events for the player. So we want to register player event, and I want to first set the name to free. The ID is free for the player login, which is our function we want to call. Register player event and set this to 4, and this is on player logout. And the last one we need is the register player event, and this would be 8, and this is on player died. These are our events like we always do to listen for. Let's create the function for these. So let's function on player login, and let's just real fast function on player logout. Let's just create these first, and then we can I will show you the documentation of where to find things about these events. So and end. Okay, great. So now let's head into Luna. Let me just find it for a sec here. Yes, here we are on the Lua engine for AzerothCore. Now we want to register these events for the player. It's important that it's the player. So here we can say register player events to find all the events. And as you might see here, you can see that on player login is free, and these are the arguments for it. On player logout is 4, as we wrote here, and the arguments is the same as the player login. The next thing we need to do is actually find the number 8, so the player event on killed by creature, which is an 8, and this one has the event killer and killed. So let's head in and write this one. So we can see here this is event killer and killed. For us to better know what this last one is, we want to write player here. I should probably say that these are just like, you can say, names for them, so everyone like knows, okay, this event has the killer, so that's the creature that killed us, and killed is the player that got killed. We can always just use these or change these names in here. So for me, I could write creature here, or I could write something else. But for me, it's fine to keep killer here, because that's normal, and it's easy to understand. And the player here, we keep that instead of killed, because we always know that it's the player that's killed. So why not just write player to make it less confusing? Okay, let's get back on track. So on player login, here we write event and player, because that's the player again. And up here we write event, comma, player. These two is basically the same. Okay, now let's create something new to this series, or new to my videos. Probably someone in here has heard about them. But in Lua we have something called tables. And these tables can hold, you can think of tables like a list. So we have a table we will create a table called player list, and equals to and code brackets. What this means is that we now have a list of players. So let me give this a table named player list. So let me try to explain this. A table is basically just a list. You can think about it as a list where you can go through and store things. So what we want to do is we want to store stuff like the players, what is called the player. We want to store the players, all the players in here. And we want to store them based on their own unique ID. So to get started here, since this is Lua and Lua doesn't have the standard like .add and .remove, we actually need to create those functions ourselves. So to do that, let's write them. So we write function player list .add. In here, what we need to do is that we need to have the ID for player, or the character, sorry. Player is basically just the character. We need to have the ID for them. And then we want to keep a copy, or not a copy, but a reference to the player object. Then we want the death counter. And later down the line, we want to have the list of all the rewards the player already have earned. Or I would say not earned, but gotten from dying. So let's first write in here. I will just put an end here. So here we will say EUID. That's the name for the ID used in the database and for players. I will show you later how to get those, but for now, just ride along and I will explain. Comma, and say player object, comma, death counter. And for now, we're just gonna keep it like this and not have the check for what rewards you have earned, because at the moment we're just creating the bare bones of the system. Next, we want to go down and say player list. Oh, sorry. Function player list dot remove to remove a player. Here we want to write again. We actually don't only want the ID here because, as I said, we are gonna work with. So the player list, the way we find a player in there is actually using this, and then we get. Using this, we go through the list, see which one matches this ID. When we find them, we get the player object and death counter for that player. So when we want to remove one, the only thing we need to remove or find to remove is the player via the ID, and then it removes that element of it. So now we want to write end to close off our player list.remove function. Now let's go up to the player list and actually make it so when you run this function, you add the player to the list. Way to do this is by doing player list and then these ones. I will make a comment on, or a block on a text come up here, naming them, and I'll remember that for next time. Then we want to write the GUID, that's the identifier, and set that equals to, and code brackets, and go 2 lines down. In here, we want to say player object equals to player object. This is important to remember because when you're doing this, what you're actually doing is that when you send this to the player list.add, you send these as arguments, and remember to keep the first character of it always the lowercase, because when you get this, you will be able to basically do like this. So let's say we have the GUID, so we can do that, and then we can dot, and then we can say player object, and now we can do all the functions on the player. So let me just show you what I mean here. We can actually do colon, and then we could say send notification, and we can send a notification. That's why we keep the player object in the list, so we always have a reference to the player and can call everything on the player. Now let's go back up here, and we want to call our variable here death counter with its uppercase D, and here death counter with a lowercase d, because that's the argument that it got, augmented got. So now we basically have created our new list. When we run this, we add the player based on this GUID into the list with these, with the player object of it and the death counter. Next, let's go down to the player list.remove, and let's remove it. So player list, and again we are GUID, since we are looking for the GUID in here. Or what you actually want to do is create it as an if statement, my bad. If, then end. What we are doing in here is we are saying if this player, or if we can find this player with this ID inside the player list, then we do what is inside here. Player list here, and GUID equals nil. The reason we are doing this is because when you say something is nil, you're basically removing it in Lua. So this up here, like when we find the player, we get the player via the GUID, and we set it to null, means that these under the player object we got, or the player in the list we got, is basically also being removed. And I think that's all for today. So if you learned something new and enjoyed the video, please leave a like and a subscribe, and comment down below if you have any questions about anything with this tutorial, or you have any ideas for new tutorials. See you in the next one.